Now, as one of the grand old ministers down our way used to say, before I begin, I want to say a few things. And the first one that I want to say is what a privilege it is to be back again at the Indiana camp. I've already met a good many of you, and the rest of you I sure will have opportunity again to share with in this fellowship. I am reminded, I presume that some of you, as you start in and hear our beginnings, you'll say, all right, now, here we go again. I was down just the other day in St. Louis for our disciple international convention. And we had your good Baptist. I know I never get this many people together. I haven't got some good Baptists in the house. And we had Ed Dahlberg speaking to us. And Ed stepped up before the group, that remarkable, great Christian leader. He said, you know, I feel right at home with you people, just real at home. Said, I don't think I ever felt any more at home anywhere unless it's up in Minnesota with my Swedish friends. And I said, I just came home from up there the other day, and he said, we got one great big Swede up there, his name's Sam. That's unusual for a Swede, he said, especially this one because his last name's Ting. And he said, they're always saying, where did you get such a name as that? He said, it was not always this way. So when I came from the old country, my name was Jan Janssen. But when I came over to the Port of Commitment over here, and they lined us all up, and they said, what your name is? 3 men. Right ahead of me said, Jan Janssen, Jan Janssen, Jan Janssen. They come to me, I say, same thing. So they write it down like that. So that's what I've been ever since, same thing. Well, now, I just wanted you to know tonight that in all probability this week, it'll be much of the same thing because really it's the same Lord and the same God, the one Father of us all, and the same Christian witness and experience. And I'm just truly hopeful and very certain that the Spirit of the Lord will move on this conference. I've learned long since that that's what we're here for. If that happens, everybody here is going to have a marvelous time. If that doesn't happen, it doesn't make a bit of difference how fine performance this entire group that has worked this all out may put on, how fine the speakers may do. If we wind up without the warm hand of the Spirit of God upon us, we'll go home hungry. I remember hearing Merton Rice, and I know now I've got some good Methodists in the house. And if I have any that are old enough at all to remember that marvelous preacher who did a great deal for me in my youth, one of the greatest, I think, pulpiteers that we've had in America in recent generation. And I heard him say one time, I used to think that great preaching was the preparation of a great sermon and delivering it. I have learned long since, he said, that it's really the preparation of a great preacher and delivering him. I have learned that also. And if there's anything this week that any of the leadership of this camp is going to do for you, it's not going to be because of what they say or what they do. It's going to be because of what they are. That's what really overflows, and what does it now then with this beginning. Now I want to come to the topic that I want to talk to you about tonight, and my theme is what's right with America. I thought that'd be a good place for us to begin. Is there any of you who has not heard a lot of people talking about what's wrong with America? That we've heard so much of that it would be carrying coals to Newcastle if I should have chosen tonight such a theme as that. So I want to talk to you about something else. I wish tonight I could beat a gong, that I could ring a bell, blow a whistle. Now, whenever you hear somebody with that much enthusiasm, you're very likely to say, uh-oh, somebody's going to deplore something. Somebody's about ready to tell us that the things are all about ready to go down the drain, that we're in all kinds of trouble. That's not what we ought to be ringing bells about at all. I had ran onto a very interesting statement the other day by Emily Dickinson. Now, I'm certain that some of you know something about Sister Emily, but how many of you know about her father that they called Mad Edward? Now, I want to tell you why they called her father Mad Edward, and she describes the incident very clearly. Now, listen to what she says about it. We were all startled by a bell ringing loudly at supper time in our quiet Amherst village. Thinking of nothing but a catastrophic fire, we all rushed out of our house in the street to see. And there was Father, standing by the bell, pointing to a breathtaking sunset. A lovely evening sky, colored gorgeously with pink and gold, displayed itself to the wondering and the admiring people who poured from their homes in response to his startling summons. But the indignant city fathers fined Father £4 for his mad act of unlawful behavior. Now, I say that's the silliest thing I've heard of. Why should you fine somebody for ringing a bell for something that's beautiful and wonderful? Why do we have to ring all the bells and blow all the whistles and stir people up for things that are going wrong all the time? I ask you to remember tonight, I hope and pray we will all remember, that we have so many things to be thankful for, and we need occasionally somebody to jog us at that point. Now, because of that fact, and you know, there are always people who are reminding us of the things that are wrong, the things that are dangerous. But I read a story just the other day. If you haven't read this story lately, I've got a little granddaughter. By the way, you ought to see our grandchildren. Dorothy's home looking after them. There's a reason she isn't able to be out here. And we've got a little Lee who's 7 years old who reads like a scholar from away on back. She started in school without able to read a thing last September. Now, I'm going to talk about my I've gotten the advantage of you. I get first. And by Christmas, she could read all of her own books, and by the end of the year, she reads about anything, including the Bible. The other day, though, she still likes to have somebody read to me, and she came to me with a book and said, "Grandpa, read me this story." So I said, okay, and I laid everything down, got her up in my lap, and so help me, I wouldn't have missed that experience for a whole lot. The story was Chicken Little. Did you ever hear the story of Chicken Little? Now, let me tell you what it said. Once upon a time, Chicken Little went out and she was sitting under a gooseberry tree. And away up in the top of the gooseberry tree, a little gooseberry broke loose. And it come down and popped her right on the top of her little head, rolled down her, and rolled off of her little tail. She jumped up and screamed and said, "The sky is falling, the sky is falling." And she started to run and scream, and she met Goosey Lucy. And she said, "Run, the sky is falling." So he went, honk, 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 he went, and then they met Cocky Locky, and then they got him all stirred up, and he went over, and then they met Foxy Locky. They met a whole string of them. And every one they met, the whole bunch said, "Run, the sky is falling," until pretty soon they had a panic. And the whole bunch was, "The sky is falling." And they came to old Mr. Owl. Ha! Old Mr. Owl sitting up there in a tree, with one big old eye looking down like this. So they all yelled up to him, and they said, "Run, the sky is falling." And he looked down and said, "Who said so?" Thank the Lord for somebody who wants to check the sources. Who said so? He said. Well, they began to look at one another. Who did say so? Where did this thing start? And finally, they traced the thing back to one little bit of an old yellow chicken down here. And they said, "How do you know?" She said, "I know because it hit me right on top of the head and rolled right down my back and fell off of my little tail." They said, "Show it to us." So the whole bunch of them go traipsing back. Old Mr. Owl superintended the thing. They went clear back to the gooseberry bush. And when they got to the bottom of it, the whole thing got started over one little old squashed gooseberry. That is the whole basis of the entire panic. Now, do you know, the other day, one of our fine young women of my congregation, I saw her one morning, and if you ever saw an old hen after a big rain, she was just that droopy, like this. I said, "What happened to you?" She said, "I attended a meeting last night." I said, "What?" She said, "It was a patriotic meeting." I said, "It was?" She said, "Oh, yes, they showed us a film at that meeting." She said, "They've got us. We're down the drain. It's all over. It's all..." I said, "What's down the drain? Who's got us?" She said, "I saw it right there in the picture. Starts out way up there," she said, "in the Scandinavian Peninsula. Big pincers coming out of there like this." And she said, "Then around through Europe and on down through Latin America." It's too late. We're down there. It's all over. They got us. They got us. I said, "Who's got us?" Now, somebody, see, whoever planned that particular rally may have thought that they were planning this in order to stir up American citizens to make a great fight for freedom. But they didn't stir her up. They punctured her balloon. They flattened her out. They overplayed their hand completely, and here she was. Now, I've seen a good bit of that, not only with respect to Americans, but with respect to Christians. And so help me, you can't live on your losses financially. And you can't live on them spiritually either. And there are occasions when we need very definitely to have somebody remind us of the things that are right with our situation. Well, now I believe then very definitely that we need to change the face of America. I can remember Pricetown in 1912 and 14. Now, Pricetown you don't know about. You'd had to live within 5 miles of it, or then you'd have never heard of it, because I was born and raised in Pricetown, Ohio. It was a crossroads. It had a total population of 100 souls from Alec Ferris's over to the graveyard and the big bridge to the schoolhouse. And in that town, though, we had a lot of spirit. We had one church. We never went to anybody else's. We wouldn't have more gone into a Methodist or an Episcopal church than we would into a heathen temple. We thought everybody belonged to this church in the whole world. But say, we had a band too, Leon. We had a band and a bandstand. And we could just make more noise and have more fun. And come Decoration Day, we were all set. Decoration Day was one of the big days of the whole year. They'd line us children all up when I was 4, 5, 7, 8 years old. We had old soldiers then. Put them up front like this. One of them played a fife. I could whistle a tune right now from beginning to end that he used to play. Played another one with a drum over here in a kettle drum. And boy, did we march out to the cemetery and decorate the graves and hear the story of these men and what they had done and how they'd given their lives and what they gave it for. And then we'd march over to the other side. Hot. I can remember the heat of those days like this. The old bass drum swelled up so tight one day, it was so hot, that the next time he hit it, he went clear through it. The old club went clear on through. But we thought that was all in the interest of the great American eagle, and it was perfectly all right. Nobody objected to it. And then we'd come back to the church, and flights of oratory. Speaking of that American eagle, they got him going up so high that you could he'd go clear on out of sight on occasion. But I remember that they convinced me that America was a great place to live, that it was a marvelous heritage that was ours. And those Decoration Days stand out in my mind not only because we had ice cream that night. That's the only time we ever did have it. Now, there are none of you people that were raised as primitively as I. But do you know the only reason we could have ice cream? Somebody went over to an old ice house where they put up ice in sawdust. And we'd get out the old blocks of ice, bring them over and beat them up in a phosphate sack with an axe. And then some of the women would take a big bucket, generally a big slop bucket made out of wood, and put it on the outside. You'd put your ice down in there and then take a little tin bucket inside and stand there and whirl it this way and scrape it down with a spoon. That's the first ice cream that we ever tasted, and we used to do that on Decoration Night. And the marvelous fellowship and the great impression that it made of the greatness of this. And then came a change. Then came the time when it was unpopular to be patriotic. If you said anything very much, if you waved a flag, you were corny. And they thought that, no, look, we want to be internationalists. And if you'd speak a kind word, even hardly, for your own nation, it seemed that you were old-fashioned and that you hadn't grown up yet. We want to be world-minded. Now, it's all right to be world-minded. May I remind you, it's a fine thing to be ecumenically minded as a Christian. But supposing some of you people say, look, I want to be a member of the great ecumenical church. I'm disgusted with Methodism anymore. I don't want to be a good Methodist anymore. Supposing some of you say, I've outgrown the Baptist church, and you despise Baptists and you push them aside, or Lutherans, or whatever. I want to belong. You'll be a mighty poor ecumenicist. The finest members of the great world church of Jesus Christ are the ones who grow right straight up through these marvelous groups that we've inherited, not the ones who spurn them and throw them aside. Just so, if you want to be the finest citizen of this world of ours, it'll be because you are the greatest and the most loyal and the most appreciative citizen of this nation of ours. Not because you've come to the place where you don't think that you should even put out a flag on the 4th. How many of them do you see anymore on the 4th of July or on Decoration Day, or how many of them on your car? We used to have an ornament that we put on the old Ford. It had a neck to put them on out there, too, in the front. We've lost that neck off of the front of our cars these days, the old radiator cap. But we had a whole display of those flags. Now, I know that's not the sum total of patriotism, but I'm definitely believing that we need to again pick up some of these expressions of our loyalty to America. I was listening to Conrad Hilton the other day speaking in ours, and he said, you know, I went out to San Francisco. I went out there to hear Khrushchev when he was here in our country a while back. I wanted, he said, to sit in the front seat. I went early because I wanted to see him personally. And the reason I wanted to get as close to him as I could, while he spoke, I hoped that I would see at a glance that he was phony. I hoped he'd be 50% phony. I hoped he'd be at least 10% phony. But he said, listen, that man's not phony. He believes what he says. He actually believes that we here in America are so soft that we have lost our deep convictions about either our religion or our patriotism. We have been fed so much good food, and we've got it so easy and so soft that this young generation, he thinks, will never sacrifice for anything. They won't fight for it. We're going to be a pushover. That's what he believes. He said, the other day I was over in Madrid, and he said, there some of these Spanish citizens were saying to me, do you know that right now 51% or more of the nations of the world are betting on that bunch over there to win in this world struggle? And he said, you know why? He said, I think I'll put it this way. They are super salesmen of a rotten product. And you are rotten salesmen of a superior product. Why don't you get on the ball? He said, you've got so much to sell. In terms of this nation of yours under a God, a nation where all men have an opportunity to be brothers to one another and children of the one Father in heaven. You've got so much to, but you're rotten salesmen. Now, I believe that's true, not only of our nation, but of our religion. We are poor salesmen indeed. And then he said, I stood there and listened to Khrushchev stand right up boldly and say, speaking particularly to the young people, and there are 53 of them, I understand, in this camp. The Lord bless you. That's going to put a lot more pep in this camp than many I've seen in a long time. And he said, listen, we'll bury you. And by the way, it's you people he's talking to. He hasn't got his shovel quite ready for my generation yet, but he thinks he's got it all set just in time for you. We'll bury you. And then he went ahead to say this. Scientific knowledge, and he said a study of political history, those two will wipe out religion and God completely from the face of the earth in just a few years. We say, where have I heard that before? Scientific knowledge. He said, all you need to do is just get a little more scientific knowledge and you'll know better than ever to have any interest in religion. I was listening to a good brother minister of mine the other day from out on the West Coast. He'd just come home from Oak Ridge, Tennessee. He was down there where they have the largest concentration of scientific brains that we've got together anywhere on the face of this earth. When his address was announced, they had an auditorium that would hold 1,000 people, and it was packed out, standing all around the edges like this. Every one of those fellows a PhD, and it was not a compulsory attendance. Why were they there? They said, we of all the people on the face of this earth know desperately today how much we need an intelligent religion. And if you've got an intelligent preacher who has a message with respect to real religion, we want to hear what he's got to say. So there was Dr. Lewis Evans standing up there speaking to these men, and they were listening intently to his message. And in the course of it, he said, in the year 1941, only 11% of the scientists whose names were in Who's Who in America would admit that they were religious, that they believed in God. He said by 1950 it had grown to 34%. In 1962, he had said, that's when he happened to be there, 1900, I understand, he said it is 61%. Well, he told them all that and went on to say some other things. When he'd finished, he said there were a dozen or more of these fine scientists who came down and said, where'd you get that figure? Where did you get that figure of 61%? It's too low, way too low. It's entirely too low for this group. They said of these men who are right here now, we feel more than anybody the more we get acquainted with this world of ours, the more recognition we have for the fact that a great, marvelous God and creator and sustainer must be back of it and in it, and must be kept alive in our lives, or there is absolutely no hope for us. Then he told me about how the director of that marvelous Oak Ridge project was walking with him afterward. And he said, you know, I had an interesting letter the other day. It was written from the mother of one of our young people, like some of these boys out here just starting college. And said this poor distracted mother wrote to him now and said, my boy's been writing home, and do you know, he's got trouble. His science professor has decided that there is no God. And he's getting the boys all stirred up and mixed up, and my boy is writing home. She said, Doctor, what shall I tell him? And this great scientist who heads up that Oak Ridge project said, I'll tell you what to tell him. Ask him, where did you get that stupid 19th century professor? That business that he's talking about is completely outdated and passé. Sure, 100 years ago we had a lot of men who thought they were out and out materialists, who didn't believe in God, intelligent men. He said, today, so help me, the little puny priests of science may prate against God, but the high priests never do. And then he turned to Dr. Evans and said, I want you to know that of this group of people we have here, they're probably far more serious-minded about the need for a knowledge of God in this day than the mind run of people out there. Now we turn to Khrushchev. Hear that, Khrushchev? Do you hear that? So a knowledge of science will wipe out God and religion, will it? And then listen to the other part of it. And a study of political history will completely wipe God and religion from the minds of men on the face of the earth. Where have we heard that one? But let's study a little political history. Khrushchev, let's take just a glance at its pages. So you're going to wipe out God. I remember very distinctly that a man by the name of Herod one time said, I will kill this Christ child. But he couldn't even find the Christ child. But they found Herod all right, eaten up with worms. I remember a little later, a man by the name of Caesar said, I will completely stamp out this Christian religion. I will burn these Christians as torches for my garden. I will throw them to the lions. I'll stamp it out. But just as a man tries to stamp out a fire in a new straw stack on thrashing day, by hitting it with a pitchfork, every time he hits it, there are 20 brands that fly in different directions, and every one of them starts a separate fire. And Caesar found out he couldn't begin to stamp it out. But they found Caesar, all right, stabbed to death on a marble slab. I remember that Hitler said, they weren't smart. I will pull this business of religion up by the roots. I'll get down to the very root of it. He couldn't find the roots of it at all. But they found Hitler a smoking cinder in a stinking gutter in Berlin. I remember when Mussolini said one time, I will sneak up on the blind side of this thing. I'm going to stamp it out in this fashion. I'll starve it to death. I will pick up the young women and the young men of Italy. I will organize them into the Balia, into a youth group, a military youth group, and I'll pick them all up on Friday night and I'll send them to the beaches and to the mountains and to the hills. And they'll be in their camps and in their recreations and bring them back on Monday, and the church will never get a chance at them, and we'll starve this thing to death. Do you know the church bells today are ringing all over Italy? And they found Mussolini hanging by the side of a miserable paramour to a steel girder. Khrushchev, you just as well take down your little old stubby arms. They're too short to box with God. And the reason tonight I'm saying these things to you people, I want you to know that you, young people and middle-aged people and older people, who really believe in God in heaven and God on earth and believe in Jesus Christ as his revealer, as his ideal son, as his demonstrator to us of how he wants us all to live, who really believe in the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians and the 14th chapter of John, who believe in fellowship with one another and with our God. I want you to know you're on the winning team. You are on the winning team, and somebody needs to remind you of that occasionally, because I think we get to thinking every once in a while we're in a minority. We get like old Elijah, who are saying, I am left. All the rest it isn't like that. And it isn't going to be like that. I would like, if I might, to take a moment out right now to talk about something that has been in the minds of our people, and so many of my folk have asked about it. I had to talk to my people about it. And that's about this United States Supreme Court of ours, who just recently has handed down some very remarkable opinions. And they've got a lot of mighty good people pretty upset over it. Now, we need as Christians to know what this really is that has happened, and to know whether it's a catastrophe, to know whether we ought to get excited and become chicken littles and really start running in all directions at the same time. And I want to take just a moment to talk to you about this. Now, let me begin where this all began. I was raised on the old McGuffey Reader. I read to my people the other day from, can any of you remember, under the spreading chestnut tree the village smithy stands. The smith, a mighty man is he, with great and sinewy hands, and the muscles of his brawny arms are strong as iron. And then it goes ahead, and before you get halfway through it, you have a remarkable lesson on morals and religion. And in the schoolhouse where I grew up, we not only read stories like that right out of our readers, but we had prayer, and we sang songs in school, hymns and gospel songs, and we read the Bible at nearly every session that we ever got together. But do you know that was a monistic society? We were all of the same mind. As I told you a little while ago, everybody that came to that school, they were white, and they were Republican, and very definitely we're all Protestant. Now, in the meantime, something's happened to America. We didn't have any trouble about reading the Bible and praying in our school, but today we have become a pluralistic society. And we believe it, we want it that way. We have said we put on the side of the Statue of Liberty. Give me your masses struggling to be free. Come on, let me have your people from all over the world, whatever their background may be, their culture, their religious, but come on. This is a melting pot, and here you can be free to worship God according to the dictates of your conscience, not mine. And we have definitely chosen that this shall be a home of free peoples to follow God as they see fit, and we've got them. We really got them. But do you know, most of us have not thought this thing through about our school system at all. I used to go over to, when our kiddies were in Bexley School. Now, Bexley is a suburb of our city, and so help me, we got so many Jews in that section that when they have a Jewish holiday, you have to dismiss school, almost. There aren't enough the rest of them to come on in. Marvelous and high-type community, culturally, equal, and every other way. Do you know, I used to go over to school on Christmas, and there would be the most marvelous program you ever saw, and here would be all those kiddies. And I'd hear these little Jewish youngsters up there singing, "Away in a Manger," and singing, "Come thou Almighty King." And I used to think, isn't that lovely? The other night when this came out, this statement, I was sitting in a meeting in which we had a marvelous Jewish rabbi of our city, one of the most significant citizens and finest men we have in our town. And he was in the group, and I told this story. He said, "That's right, we've done that, we've been singing, but we didn't like it. We didn't think it was fair," but he said, "You know what we've done? We've said to our children, now look, we've got enough anti-Semitism in this country and in this world right now, and we don't need any more, so you go ahead and sing." But he said, "How would you like to be in a school The only school you have to go to, the school you support with your own taxes, and we run the situation, and we have Hanukkah, and we ask you to sing all of our situations of this same sort that you didn't believe in at all. You know, we had a Catholic priest sitting right over there, and he spoke up and he said, now let me tell you how it looks to us. You Protestants have been saying to us, why don't you come to the public school? You've been complaining, he said, because we have asked you for tax money to run our schools, and you say that we're not about to do. Now, I want to just, if I can, to help clarify our thinking as Christians at this point, and here's what I was quite interested to read the other day from Book 3 of the Catholic High School Religion series that they use in their high schools generally, has the imprimatur of Cardinal Spellman in the front pages. And here is one paragraph. Christ is God and the founder of the Catholic Church. Christ left to his church the authority to make laws for the worship of God. No other institution on earth has this power. All other ways of worshiping God found in the numberless non-Catholic societies are false. The material size and shape of the paper and metal money in the United States is determined by the government. No other money is legal tender, and any other agency issuing such money is guilty of counterfeiting. In the same way, non-Catholic methods of worshiping God must be branded counterfeit. Each in its own way more or less imitates the true religion, yet lacks the true value of the genuine faith of Christ. Therefore, we cannot practice them without dire penalty. Now, that is taught in their book. Now, I say they've got a right to believe that. Perfect right to believe it. Happens I don't believe it, and there's some of you, I'm sure, but they've got a right to. And one of our very great Americans said one time to somebody in a similar situation, I don't believe a word of what you say, but I'd fight to the death for your right to say it. But this Catholic priest turned to me and said, now, how would you like for us to be in a majority? We had that situation that was down in Mariemont, over here close to Cincinnati a few years ago, in which this entire section of a community, the majority of them were Catholics, and they elected their own board and put nuns in garb right in the public school and started to teach, and you should have heard the howl go up. And we, all of us, howled to high heaven. We said, he said, that's right, I can see you would. How do you think then? He said, we like it. When we send, you say, send your children to the public school if you can't pay for your own schools like that. And he said, probably that's what increasingly we're having to do. But do you want us to send them there and then you conduct a service out of the King James Version of the Bible, which has a precept right at the very beginning as a preface, in which it says definitely that this is largely designed to unseat that man of sin, that's the word that it used. Now, what am I calling this to our attention for? Because we as Americans and Christians have right now before us the question, what are we going to do in our public schools that we say are for everybody? And for the first time, because we're entering into a pluralistic community, we're really faced up to the fairness of this situation. And we've had really three cases come up. The Regent's Prayer, in which a group over in New York, now do you know that Regent's Prayer is a very interesting thing? There isn't anything wrong with that Regent's Prayer. Listen to it. Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon Thee, and we beg Thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our country. Amen. Now, what's wrong with that? Here's what the Supreme Court said was wrong with it, not with what it says. But what's wrong with it is the fact that that prayer was designed by a government, and the government is telling everybody who is there to pray and what to pray. And they say, so help me, over in Europe and in other days, we had so much trouble with that you're not going to get us as Americans to touch that thing with a 10-foot pole. It is out. You cannot, as a government, tell me what I'm going to pray and what I should pray, nor my children, nor other people. Now, so that one was thrown out. Well, many of you say, I can understand that, but what about these last two? Now, that was June in '62. Just the other day, in June of '63, came the Shemp case and the Murray case. And many Americans think, talking about right with America, oh boy, is this wrong. Because they, throughout these situations in which Bible reading and prayer in the public school room, in these two states that simply said, there shall be 10 verses of the Bible read, and or the Lord's Prayer shall be given on each morning when the school takes up. And the Supreme Court said that is out. It is unconstitutional. Because again, you have a government making a law saying not only that you shall, but pretty much what you shall do religiously. And they said that is not the American way. Now in Columbus, Ohio, we have decided, our city attorney and our school board has decided to go right ahead with voluntary religious exercises in our school. Listen to how they put it. I think it is said pretty well. Therefore be it resolved that the Columbus Board of Education support and encourage our instructional staff to continue in every reasonable way to make such use of classroom, assembly room, or other types of prayers and Bible readings as they in their own judgment shall deem proper, fitting, and appropriate to their particular occasion. So, thank God, I said, that's the way we like to do things in America. Let's not have any law that says, you must read the Bible. Let's don't have any governments, you must not pray. You must not read the Bible in this. Let's leave each teacher in his room, her room, who has in her own heart the Spirit of God and wants to impart it to her children, who has it in his heart and wants to pass it on to the young people who are with him. Let's let him look at his situation and do what seems to him and to her to be right and best in his own room. That's the way it was done in the early days, and that's the way I hope and pray we can continue to do it. And thus far, the Supreme Court has not said one word against that. And I ask you to remember that. They only have thrown out the compulsive features. Well, in any event, now, while I'm speaking of that, I believe very definitely that what came out of this in the long run, the decision as it was read, said this: the wholesome neutrality that this court upholds stems from the teachings of history that a powerful sect might get hold of the government and throw back of its particular orthodoxy the public support. The place of religion in our society is an exalted one, achieved through a long tradition of reliance upon the home, the church, and the inviolable citadel of the individual heart and mind. We have, through bitter experience, come to know that it's not within the power of government to invade that citadel, whether its purpose be to aid religion or to oppose it. In the relation then between man and religion, the state of this government is firmly committed to a position of neutrality. But that doesn't mean that you need to be committed to a position of neutrality. And I hope and pray that we will know that the place to teach religion is right where it was taught when it had its finest day in our lives and in our fathers' lives. Do you know my grandpa and grandma lived down there on the side of a hill in a great big old brick house, and every night of the world, come bedtime, Grandma would get over here by the old lamp, old coal oil lamp over on one side, get out her steel rim spectacles and the big old Bible, and Grandpa would be over at the other end, and 8 kids in a row right around here in the middle like that. And they got them all in there in the old fireplace out here, and then Grandma would begin to read. And she didn't read a verse, she read a chapter. And if she got going and got interested, she might have read 2. And the kids might have sat there and squirmed a little bit. Do you know they came to the place where they knew Hophni and Phineas? They knew all about Elijah and Jeremiah, better than our kids know Superman today, and with far better aid to their moral life. And then when Grandma would finish reading, Grandpa would say, down. And believe me, they all went down. They turned right down, got down on there, and then Grandpa would pray. And the prayer that he would offer, he talked to the Lord just like the two of them were good friends. He'd say, "Dear God, you know that it's been pretty dry of late, and our corn's starting to roll, and our beans out here begin to wither, and we may not have enough food to last us through the winter. Dear God, we need your help. We need a little rain." And then he'd get around after a while to these children, dear God, and he'd pray for them by name, one by one, that they'll grow up to be decent men and decent women and take their place in this community and in the churches of this community and in this. Do you think any schoolhouse can take the place of that? Are we bereft of opportunity to teach religion to our nation just because somebody has said that we can't have a compulsory prayer in school? I want to tell you what that kind of exposure did to those children. Grandma told me this story, which is a priceless one. I'd like for it to be part of your heritage as it's been of mine. She said one night they had a bunch of little ducks. Now, somebody around here knows little ducks personally. And they are the softest things and so cute. But Grandma said you can't wool them because they're fragile. They won't take it. So keep your hands off of the ducks. You can look at them, but don't play with them. Well, but she said that night she went out to pen up the ducks. Uh-oh, there was a dead one lying there, and he had the marks all over him of having been thoroughly wooled. So Grandma never said a word. She waited till the Bible reading was over, and the prayer was over, and they got ready to go upstairs to bed, and she said, just a minute, kiddies. Who killed the little duck? Now, she said it was so quiet in there you could hear a handkerchief fold. Nobody said a word. She said, all right, go on to bed. If you kiddies think that you can go to bed with a lie in your heart and sleep, go on, give it a try. But I'm saying to you, it won't work. Somebody killed a little duck. She said they went on. Nobody said a word. Went upstairs. Well, said Grandpa went over, wound the old wall sweeper clock, and came back over and banked the fire, and she put the cat out, and he wound up his old Elgin. He had one of that kind, he took a door down at one side and put a big key in it and sounded like a coffee grinder. And he got that, and got all ready and said, we're just ready to go up to bed ourselves, and we heard boom, 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 somebody coming down the stairway. And we'd hear somebody crying. And she said, pretty soon here she comes, our little 5-year-old girl. Said she burst through the door and said, Ma, I can't sleep. I killed a little duck. I killed a little duck. I killed a little duck. Now, do you know we got an awful lot of people today who've killed a little duck, but do you know what they do? They take a sleeping pill. And they go right ahead. And then they kill some more ducks, and then they drink some liquor on top of it, and they try to keep ahead of the little duck. Grandpa and Grandma had the better idea. Where you are exposing your children day by day or night by night to an influence like that which took place around that family altar, they can't sleep when they've killed the little duck. And they clean up. And every single one of those children, every one of them, became a leader in the church life of the community around where they grew up. I had the marvelous privilege of growing up with more cousins than anybody ever had to the square inch. I never needed a girlfriend in my youth. I had cousins all over the place to go everywhere with me. It never was a question on Sunday, shall we go? It was just, where shall we go for dinner today? We got together. It was wonderful. Just because a great cohesive bond in the form of a father and a mother who believed in God and who let it right in their own lives just overflow into the lives of their children. I come to my conclusion tonight at this word. We've still got a lot of these things today that are marvelously right with America. But I hope and pray that we don't let them get away from us. Norman Peale tells a very remarkable story. Now, most of you know Norm. And when Norm Peale was working his way through college over there at Ohio Wesleyan in Delaware, Ohio, he said he had to sell aluminum to get through school. And he said one day he went out, they sent him out the first day, had him all loaded up, pans and pots hanging all over him like this, and he said he started up to the first door. And he said the closer he got to that door, the bigger that door got. And he said finally he saw that doorbell and looked at him like a pumpkin. And he said, I was just shivering all over. And he said, finally pushed on it, and he said, the door opened, and the biggest woman he ever saw in his life. She said, yeah? Said he said, lady, you wouldn't want to buy any aluminum. When she said, I sure wouldn't. Bang! Said the door went, said he went out of there whipped for the day, beaten clear down. Said he went back to the hotel, sneaked in. Said about 4:30 that evening, the trainer came in, the fellow who was in charge of this whole bunch of boys who were supposed to be out here selling aluminum. Several of them must have got on about as well as Norm did. Said he came in, said, what's the matter with you, young man? He told him the story. He said, oh, now listen. Now, don't you worry about that. That's happened to a lot of better salesmen than you. He said, do you know what got wrong with you? This is a pretty good-sized job, and you've got to feel alone. That's what got you. You got the feeling by yourself. You were all alone. And I said, tomorrow we're going to do this different. Tomorrow you and I are going to work the same street. I'm going to work one side of it. You're going to work the other side of it. And he said, when you walk up to the door and that door starts to swell on you and your knees begin to shake, he said, you look across and I'll go this way. I'll go this way. And he said, you'll know, right? I mean, what's going on? He said, that's all. Okay. So he said, sure enough, next morning I loaded him all up again, pots and pans all over him. Said he started out and he's turned down the other side over here. And he said, I started up to that door. And he said, sure enough, it began to swell. And he said, by the time I got up to the steps, I was shaking again. He said, I looked across and he went, hey, buddy, like that. He said, do you know something just quieted right down inside of me? He said, I squared my shoulders up. He said, I went up and pushed on that doorbell. He said, the door swooped, and there was the littlest woman I ever saw in my life. And he said, I said to her, lady, I have some marvelous pots and pans and cooking utensils here. Wouldn't you at least be willing to let me come in and just show them to you? And she said, well, now, you know, maybe that's just exactly what I want to have. Come on in. He said, I made a sale in the first house and I was set up for the day. But he said 3 or 4 times later, when I got 3 or 4 good hard slams in my face and I began to shake, I'd look across and he'd say, he said, listen, let me say to all of you young people, as I say to you tonight, and older ones as well, you're living in a day right now where all the doors are swelling. We're living in an age and in a time when to go to the moon is not out of the question at all. And to simply have a man go up here and ride around in a capsule is old stuff. Now, we're not going to bother with that anymore. The next time we're going to have 2 or 3 of them go up, and they're going to come out and roam around up there and come back in. This is a tremendous day, and the world has swelled, and it's got big. And if you're not careful, you get lost in it unless you are never alone. Unless you cultivate in your life a continual association with the one who is always with you and who has said, I will be with you always. And you look to him and you see him go this way. Yes, buddy. And that's what it takes. May God spare us lest we shall lose that which was the real basis for the things that made so much right with America. Dear God, our Heavenly Father, I pray tonight for this group of Christians, of good people from their various homes and communities and businesses and schools and churches. I pray, dear God, that in taking so much interest in a lot of the things that are so far up and so far down the line that we forget some of the basic fundamentals. I pray, even as old Moses prayed, lest you forget when those houses of yours become so good and you've eaten and you are full and your silver and your gold and all that you have is multiplied, beware lest you forget the Lord your God. For if you do and go after other gods, you shall surely perish. Dear God, we also know that if we do keep close to you, we'll not perish. And nothing can make us perish, and we have no fear. We'll be around regardless of what goes out, and we'll still be standing regardless of what falls. Keep us in that fellowship. I pray in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.